So we pulled together a team. You know, I had built a technology-based reading program for younger struggling kids, primarily focused on pre-K through third grade. And we wound up growing that business significantly, and ultimately down the road wound up selling it. And I was asked by some folks to then build a platform for older struggling kids, kind of as a follow-on to what we did for the younger kids. And so, you know, in the process of doing that, you know, I had been asked to become represent the state of Illinois for the Illinois delegation for No Child Left Behind, to help write the Reading First initiative for the state of Illinois, and worked with the White House on some national education policy stuff. And through those travels, I wound up meeting a lot of really smart folks. So when I was asked to put together a program for older struggling kids, I reached out to many of the folks that I had met over the years, and we kind of collaborated on really building something from the ground up for these older kids. And so this is these are sort of the lead authors. I don't know if any of these names are familiar to you, but some of these folks are really nationally renowned for their expertise in fluency and phonics and all of the core areas of reading. So when I say we built it from the ground up, what I mean is we really did look at what does research tell us about where these kids struggle, why they struggle. Obviously we know that many of these students come from kind of vocabulary impoverished backgrounds, maybe not particularly lots of immersive exposure in language and the kind of relationship between spoken and written language and text. So, we looked at a number of design elements, content development, engagement, motivation, to really try to build the most impactful and efficient program to really help these kids close the gap. And I'll give you some examples of that as we go. The program has a lot of intelligence built in. It's we partnered with an assessment company called Metametrics. They're the folks who developed the Lexile framework, and we built an automated, embedded placement assessment. So the student comes in, do the assessment, get a base level, automatically placed in the program, and then periodically, roughly every 6 weeks, they'll get an ongoing level assessment. And then based on how the student's performing, dynamically different content will be presented and adjusted with different methodologies of presentation and scaffolded supports to help the student where they are. And I'll show you some examples of that. Another aspect of the program that we think is different is not only do we really have highly targeted content developed kind of the right time and the right way, but we also built in really high quality multimodal instruction. So we're not just giving the students information and time to practice, but we're really teaching the way a good teacher would deliver the information. And we're really trying to bombard the students with a lot of different strategies for understanding, retaining, and being able to recall the information. So there's, video, text, audio, stories, and a lot of different pneumatic devices for them to be able to kind of retain the information. For these older kids, also, one of the, they have not had a lot of experience in academic success. They tend to have low motivation, low academic confidence, some negative peer pressure, a lot of motivational persistence, resilience sort of challenges. And so we did quite a bit to try to reach out to the students to help really get them leaning forward in the program. So ultimately, over time, you want to build intrinsic motivation, but you also have to build in the extrinsic tools to at least get the initial hook. So, in addition, the program is highly customizable, very flexible. So, depending on where not only the students are, but where the teachers are, how much time they have, the kind of background and training that they have available to them. Students can really be anywhere from a sort of plug-and-play model where they can sit down, take the initial assessment, and the program will make some judgments, and they'll be off to the races, and will adjust over time. But alternatively, virtually every aspect of the program can be modified by the educator. And you can change, if we in the program teach, phonics, vocabulary, fluency, and comprehension. And when I say that, there's a lot of different subcategories under that. But if you, for example, want this student focused primarily on phonics and another student on vocabulary, or you actually like your phonics program, but you want more work, you can actually turn areas off and on. You can change, you can activate Spanish language supports. You can turn on spelling activities. There's a lot of different ways you can customize it based on, the teacher and the school's appetite. So when I talk about phonics and vocabulary, here would be some of the things that are included. And we're going to go a little kind of quickly through some of this. You'll see some of the screenshots kind of look and feel. But so, for vocabulary, of course, it's not just vocabulary words, but, morphology and multiple meaning words and idioms. And then here's comprehension, some of the things we do in comprehension, and fluency. I'll take a moment to pause and talk for a moment about fluency. We, of course, in fluency, we cover, rate, accuracy, and prosody, of course. And we'll see examples of that. But one of the things that we do that's maybe a little different is we have different model readers in the program. Male and female, Caucasian, African American, and Hispanic, and we have, so different types of model readers, all of whom are great readers worth modeling. But the student would listen to the model reader. They would then try to read the passage themselves under a lot of different scenarios. They could then record themselves reading the passage, and they can compare their reading to the reading of the model reader. And after they've practiced and they've recorded themselves, if they like that recording, they could save it, they could submit it to their teacher. And then at her convenience, the teacher could listen to that model reading, and if she chose, she could actually save those recordings and build a fluency portfolio for the student that she could share over time and say, hey, Andy, look at how your reading's improved since the beginning of the semester, or share it with a parent. So here would be some other examples of some of the activities. We're going to go through a lot of this in the program. Let me actually show you, I'm going to show you this one animation because I think it'll capture some of the concepts I'm talking about. So this is an animation for morphology, the root word auto.
The root word...
Can everybody hear this, by the way?
Yep. Yes.
Okay.
Auto means self. Let's look at the word automobile. An automobile is a car. The word automobile is a combination of the word parts auto, which means self, and mobile, which means movable. So the word automobile means a thing that moves itself. Before cars were invented, people traveled in carriages that were pulled by horses. Then, in the 1890s, the first automobile was invented. This machine did not need a horse to move. It moved by itself. That's why cars were named automobiles. Today, some people just call them autos, which is just short for automobile. Let's look at some other words with the root word auto: autopilot and autograph.
Well, I'll stop the animation here. So I just wanted to show, so here is a very discrete concept, the root word auto, it means self. So we obviously tell them right up front that information, but then we give them a bunch of examples and stories and, automobile, a thing that moves itself. We, show them what it looks like, by the way, someone's dinging. I don't think that's us, but that's not one of the features of the program. So, you know, we're telling them stories. We've shown them what a carriage looks like. They may never have heard the word carriage, but now they've seen it. They're learning some other things. They're learning that, you know, automobiles were actually invented by somebody in the 1890s and what an old car looked like. And so when we talk about building the program from the ground up, we really have to make the most use as we can out of our instructional time. And so we're actually building a lot of content knowledge as we're even just working on the root word auto. And you'll notice all of the instructional animations, we always take notes for the student. So you'll that yellow sticky note on the right-hand corner. All of the time, whenever we have instructional animation, we're helping the student take notes about what are the really main points they should be looking for. Similarly, we're always putting, whether we're teaching phonics or vocabulary or something else, we're always putting language in context and associating with print, because we really have to bombard that skill development. We can't just really work on one thing at a time if we really want to help these kids catch up. Anyway, any questions about kind of what's going on in this animation? You'll see more examples later. Are we good?
We're good.
Okay. So again, on the engagement front, we've done quite a bit of things to try to help make this program not only efficacious but engaging. So for example, we have built original, you know, movies for the program. So when you ask a student to read a passage, no matter how good your editorial team is, there's a significant amount of kind of contextual background knowledge that is sort of assumed. And so you may have a passage about a zoo, for example, but some of your students will know what a zoo is and have been to a zoo, and other students may not have ever seen a zoo. And they may have some vague idea that there's animals there, but they've never seen one. They don't understand, well, what do the animals look like, or how are they maintained? So we have, before we have anybody start reading, you know, the passages, they're all thematically related, you know, by different themes across the program, but they also have original movies. And I'm not going to show, I'm happy to show you the movies, but I think we'll skip that part in the interest of time. But the purpose of the movies is to do two things. One, give students kind of contextual and background visual and auditory knowledge about kind of the area in which they're going to read. And secondly, in many cases, these kids actually do know more than they think they know. And it sort of helps stimulate and activate the background knowledge of some things that they already do that they do know to help them get ready for reading. So we won't look at those. Here's, you know, an example of a sorting activity, you know, close activity. These are just kind of some of the look and feel. Here's some text structure activities in the program. Fluency. Again, I'm kind of moving fast. Here's a spelling activity. You can tell, actually I can tell where we are. This is a spelling activity where, again, you can turn this off if you want, because developmentally decoding, encoding or spelling is a much more challenging, a higher order level of mastery than decoding. But if you want to have your students also working on spelling, you have activities like this where the student would, click on the microphone, hear the word, and here is a scaffold. You can tell because it's giving a clue that the vowels are the boxes with the blue. But we'll keep moving on. There's a lot we do on the student engagement side, original, primary source images and artwork and movies, and this artwork on the bottom is creativity. You can see all of this artwork is all thematically connected. So this one has to do with energy. You can see all sorts of energy embedded in this, solar and water and wind and volcanic. We wrote original music for the program in different genre. As the students play, of course, all of these avatars that you see, these are custom avatars that the first thing they do when they come into the program is they build themselves their own avatar. And then as they, play through the program, they earn points that they can then go kind of walk up and down the street here. There's, stores up and down the street that they can go in and buy things for their avatar using the points that they've earned. So here's, they go to a pet store, and they, see the dog, and buy the dog, and they can come out. Here's like different scenes. Here's the avatar's room. There's different scenes here that you can change the avatar's clothing. You can buy musical instruments that actually play music. But I think you get the gist of it. So, again, the whole kind of rewards piece of it. Our kind of recommended usage, sort of, tier 2, tier 3 model, sort of 3 times to 5 times a week, depending on the student. We can talk more about that. We also have connected classroom materials that are thematically connected and leveled according to the software, so that they can take the skills that they're learning in this software and sort of transfer them to the printed page. Here, we'll keep flying through this. Quite a lot of stuff in here we do for ELL students. And we're not going to talk about all that. Detailed, we'll go back to the reports. Obviously, detailed reports, which we can show you when we get to the program. So I kind of flew through that. But if it's okay with you, I'd like to jump over to the software. Is that okay?
Yeah, I just have a really quick question about the fidelity of the program. Did
Sure.
you say Tier 3 was 30 minutes, 5 days a week?
For Tier 3, we would recommend at least 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week.
Okay, and every district is different, but is Tier 3, are you thinking special ed?
Well, yeah, there's a lot of different different folks will categorize kind of what's in Tier 3 a little differently. When I was saying Tier 3, well, let me say it differently. So I did quite a bit of stuff in special ed, and my response to that would be, it sort of depends. Special ed is a huge category. So I assume we're talking about, students with language-based learning deficits, and sort of, if it is the kind of special education challenge that would be language-based, and I'd be willing to include special ed in Tier 3, but I would probably recommend the higher end of the time range. So, and it depends, again, depending on the student, and do they have foundational cognitive challenges or focus and attention and memory issues, or kind of, so I'd like to have a more detailed discussion about the student population.
Sure.
But I'd probably put them in here. I'd like this 3, 4. So I'd probably put them here at the higher end of that range, 5 times a day, 5 times a day, 45 minutes. Again, depending on the student, however, 45 minutes could be, really intolerable. And you might want to do, two different sessions of 20 minutes, depending on the population. That would be, could be almost hyper-stimulating to do too much too long.
Okay.
Was that responsive? I'd like to kind of give you a more black and white answer, but it depends on the special ed population.
Sure. Okay, thank you.
Okay. So I'm going to log in as a student here. So can you see this screen?
Yeah. Yeah.
Click on a button to get started.
All right. So we'll jump around. This is the actual program. From this line down where it says demo panel, that's not actually in the software. That's something we built to allow us in a presentation to just jump around, quickly, right? So obviously a student wouldn't see that. So let's take a look at phonics first. We'll go phonics and then probably comprehension. Take a look at some of these things. So now I'm going to kind of slow down a little bit, and we'll actually look at, so here, first thing we're going to look at is a sample of phonics instruction in the program.
Click on a button to get started.
And in this piece, we're going to learn about how do you decode a word that has a single middle consonant, okay? So this is already into the program a bit. So there's a bunch of other things they've already learned. So they've already learned about how to decode a word with two consonants in the middle, and there'll be a quick review of that. But they've also learned about CVC words and how to decode a CVC word, what an open syllable is, and what the vowel does for open syllables. So you'll see some of that, but that's all earlier in the program from where we are here.
You know that when you see a word with two consonants in the middle, you can try splitting the word between the consonants to make it easier to read. But what happens when a word has only one middle consonant? Try splitting the word before and after the consonant and see which way sounds better. Most of the time, the word should be split before the consonant. Let's look at this word. Let's split the word before the middle consonant. The first word chunk, P-I, is open, so it makes the long I sound, pie. The second word chunk, L-O-T, spells lot. If we put the chunks back together, we get pie-lot, or pilot. The pilot dreamed of flying his own airplane. Now let's look at this word. Let's split it before the middle consonant. We get the word chunks hay and bit. Hay-bit doesn't sound familiar. But if we split the word after the middle consonant, we get hab-it. Habit. That sounds better. I made it a habit to brush my teeth after every meal.
What grade
Let's
level would
compare these two words.
Sorry?
What grade level would this be appropriate for?
I think decoding with one middle consonant. Let me say, as the programs for directed at students grades 4 through 10 that are struggling, the actual content. The content of the program spans roughly top of first grade to roughly 8th grade, and this is probably about a second and a half to third grade level in terms of skill area. You we good?
Thank you.
The first word has two consonants in the middle, so we can split the word between the consonants. We get the word chunks din and ner, dinner. Now let's look at the second word. It only has one consonant in the middle. We know that most words with one consonant in the middle should be divided before the consonant. So we get the word chunks die and ner, diner. That sounds right. But what if we had divided this word after the consonant? We would get din-er. That would have sounded good too. So how would you know that D-I-N-E-R spells diner and not dinner? One way is to go back to the sentence and see which word makes more sense. The diner on the corner is my favorite place to eat. Dinner doesn't make sense here. So diner must be right. Remember.
So any questions here about this animation? So this was an example then of phonics instruction where we're taking the notes for the student. What are the key points? So we're reviewing what they already know about the two middle consonants. New information, one middle consonant. Usually you split it before, sometimes try after. And we're really kind of showing them many examples in context of how that works. And try it this way. If that doesn't make sense, try it that way. So that we're really building sort of resilient readers. Any comments or questions about this instruction? Okay, so we can.
The only thing I would say is I like the way that I like the presentation so far, because these skills, when we're talking about phonics or just phonemic awareness, how do you teach that to an 8th grade boy without being insulting?
Exactly. It's part of it. A lot of times, yeah. So actually, let me go back a little bit. When we were first putting this mission together, and I was asked to put this program together, when I was selling, I don't know if you guys have ever heard of a program called aerobics, but have you ever heard of aerobics? It was in early elementary, and actually we did a lot of it in special ed as well. But in any case, when we were doing the early literacy, there was a lot of science and research that people were talking about, particularly during the heyday of NCLB, that if a student isn't reading at grade level by the end of 3rd grade, that student will never catch up. And so when I was asked about, hey, can't you guys build something for older kids? The first question is, well, what about that research? Because I'm not really interested. If that research is true, I'm not really interested in building a program that we're going to try to sell that we don't think is really going to actually work. So I pulled this crew of these researchers together, and the first thing we did was we said, does it make sense to even try to build something? And we went back and looked at the original research, and what we actually determined was that was really a misunderstanding of what what the data was saying. Really, what the data was telling us, not that these students will never catch up. What the data was telling us was if we keep doing the same things we've been doing with these students, they will never catch up. And so that was really what kind of launched the inauguration of Altis Reach. And so there's a lot of reasons why what we do doesn't, has historically not worked. And one of the reasons is exactly what you just said, which is we are trying to put the students through this, just all of the paces that they missed or didn't, retain, as if we were sending them back to do it over. And that's not only is it frustrating, it's also very embarrassing. Mm-hmm. And all of that information is not equally important. So when, if you have a student who's many years behind and has not really experienced academic success, the most important thing we're going to try to teach them, are the kind of core critical skills they need to be able to extract meaning from text. Whether they actually, mastered the content of how long Lewis and Clark's journey was isn't really that important. What's important is that they know how to extract the meaning from the next passage they're presented with, right? So that, that I completely agree with you. And in fact, when we went back, what the research showed was that explicit instruction in phonemic awareness is actually sort of contraindicated for these older kids. But anyway, so yeah, we look quite a bit at that and couldn't agree more with your observation than we do. So we did the presentation here on, decoding words with one middle consonant. And so we go to the next thing. And the first thing we're going to do a sorting activity. And so, do you split this word before or after the middle consonant? So the student would take, here, let me just sort of start moving some of these around. And I'll get some right and I'll get some wrong. And you'll notice here, I'm sorting all of them. Once I finished sorting them, the submit button popped up. And I kind of have to do my best to decode these words based on what I've learned. And
let's rethink this.
And I'll say, well, those you got wrong, try these again, right? So I'll try this again. The ones I missed, and here, this one over here.
You rock.
Okay, so that's great, but let's say well, let me keep going. So Now I'm going to work on, okay, these long vowels or short vowel sounds, and I'm going to split them for these different kind of orthographic aspects of the words. But, and if I want to go back to what what was the thing? I can just click on this, to go back, right? So I can, remind myself. If I'm not sure how to do this activity, I can click on this demo link and it'll show me how to do it. But let's say I'm kind of struggling here. I'm going to show you what the program would do with the same.
Change that bottom part. Say it again. Change that bottom part. The demo.
So you'll notice, here's me. This is the exact same activity. I was going to split these words based on before or after. But now you'll notice that because I was struggling, this template actually changed. So now every word has an audio icon next to it.
Lemon.
And it will tell me what the word
Cedar.
says, right? So I'm like, oh, okay, cedar. Is that split before or after? And now...
Nice!
It's gonna,
Raise the roof on that one.
So now it's giving me feedback. It's not going to let me sort all of them and wait till the end and then give me an answer. It's actually going to give me immediate
Nice work.
feedback.
Keep trying.
So that it won't let me be wrong for so long, right? You guys following this?
Excellent.
Okay. So I'm getting immediate feedback. It's giving me the audio supports for every one of the words. These directions all can be read to me, In
this column, put words that split before the consonant, as in open.
All right, so that's just an example of kind of how not only the support and the content, but actually the logic and operation of the templates will change based on the level of support that the student requires. So let's go to, there's more sorting activities, there's close activities. We can just look at a couple more phonics activities, I guess.
Click on a button.
So here,
Nick checked the label to see what was in the box.
So again, we're working on phonics, but again, even when I'm just hearing this question read to me, I'm looking at the text. A lot of these students really don't really have a lot of comfort and experience with just associating language to text. We're always trying to build that, even with the questions. So I'm looking for the word label, right? So here's, basic phonics. Cecilia was, so if the word I'm looking for is moping, right?
Cecilia was moping because she was cranky and tired.
So here's, that could be moping, but I know about words with two double consonants. I know that has to be a short vowel. So anyway, you can see the kinds of, activities where we're practicing the concepts that we're, learning. There's spelling activities. I'm happy to show you as much as you'd like, but I think in the interest of time, I'm going to recommend we just kind of move on to let's look at comprehension or vocabulary. We can look at let's look at comprehension. Okay. How about
Click on a button to get started.
Oh, so here's, so I'm just about to start a passage I haven't seen before, and this would be an example of the background, the movie you would see.
At the beginning of the 1800s, the United States was a young country. The territory west of the Mississippi River was known only as a mysterious land. Then, explorers began to journey west. They discovered giant waterfalls, magnificent mountains, and dense forests. It was a wild land with great herds of buffalo running free. and wolves hunting.
So you get the idea. So I'm going to get this movie so that if I'm reading about a passage and and then a wolf is in the passage, I know the student's seen a little video of a wolf. Oh, it looks kind of like a dog or a buffalo. So it's just trying to kind of stimulate the background knowledge and kind of level the playing field a little bit. And so we do here's a couple of, there's many things we do that I think are rather unique, but here's a few of them just for comprehension. So, one of the things good readers do before they start reading is they preview the passage, right? So here, the very, very first time they see the passage, you'll notice that we've kind of grayed back the font, the text. So the first time they are presented with a passage, they're going to do some preview activities. And so we're going to, have them say, first, look at the title, look at the headings, look at the captions, look at the pictures, and kind of pre-read a little bit and make some judgments about, what you think this is going to be about. So we're just previewing it first. And then we're going to have them make some predictions. So now that you've just kind of skimmed it, we did not encourage you to read it. Think about, what do you think this is probably going to be about? And so we're going to make some predictions. It's probably about this, maybe not about that. And they say, okay, these are my predictions. When they're done reading, those predictions are going to come back to them. And they're going to have a chance to revisit their predictions and sort of see how they did predicting it. Similarly, kind of getting them kind of engaged and thinking, okay, it's about a long trip. Think about this topic. What would be some of the, issues associated with going on a long trip, right? So they do this. They can write their own answers too if they want to add additional thoughts. But really just getting them engaged before reading. So now the passage is, presented to them, and they're going to read. And you'll notice, one of the things you'll notice is a bunch of words are hyperlinked. So there's three kinds of words here that would be hyperlinked in the passage. Either vocabulary words for this unit. So vocabulary words in the unit that are embedded in here, you can click on them and, sort of see a picture of it, and you can hear definition and analogs and use in context. So you can sort of see your vocabulary words in context. There are other words in here that we kind of call tier 2, tier 3 words, kind of like the Isabel Beck sort of leveling, where these aren't their vocabulary words, but they're helpful words for them to start to get more experience and exposure with for later. And then there's a third category of words like Louisiana Territory, which really isn't necessarily the next most important thing for them to learn, but it's helpful for them to have a little support because it's very passage specific, right? Anyway, so they're going to read about this, and then another thing that we do in comprehension that is very different is, reading comprehension is really the ability to extract meaning from text. And so, what we are always trying to do in the software is what a good teacher does, which is always bring the student back to the text. So here in this case, we highlight text. Okay, you've read about this passage. What would be a good question to ask yourself about this section of the passage, right? So this passage, I think it was, what was the Louisiana Territory?
That deserves some applause.
So that's a good question to ask yourself about this passage, but now you have to answer that question. So what was the Louisiana Territory? So you'll notice all this text here is highlighted. Let's say we get the answer wrong.
Give it another try.
So we don't just, we don't just say, we don't say give it another try and guess again. We actually bring them back to the text and we, narrow. You see a more narrow piece of the text is highlighted. Reread this piece and then answer, try again to answer the question.
Great job.
So similarly, later on in comprehension, we'll be working on making an inference, for example. And then, as you know, an inference is making a judgment about a fact or information based on the passage when that data is not actually explicitly in the passage, right? So you're making a judgment or a conclusion about something based on the passage where that conclusion is not actually literally in it. So we work on inferencing, making reasonable inferences. Even when the student gets the inference correct, we actually then take them back to the text and we say, now, click on an example of the text that you used as a basis for your inference. So we're always trying to bring the students back to the text, narrowing the text and having them interact with the text to kind of provide some text evidence for what they're doing or where they got the meaning. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, there's lots of questioning. You read a passage, good readers step back and say, okay, what did I just read? What's this mostly about? And then they kind of, ask themselves that question and answer that question. And, there's inference, building a good summary. There's a lot of different kinds of, comprehension activities here. So here's summarizing. So here, after they've read the passage, they would build a good summary. Which of these statements would you include in a good summary of the passage, and what would you not include? And then, at the end, we'll pick the right ones and we'll highlight what the good summary might look like. Should we keep going maybe to vocabulary, or do you have more questions about comprehension?
We can move on.
Okay.
We have a question about with the comprehension, like for instance, if you would have, do all students read about, like for instance, the Louisiana Purchase, and then is it the reading levels vary then for your maybe class of students, or is there some similarities in the stuff that they do and it's just leveled, or will different students be learning about different things depending on the level they're at?
That's a great question. So the program has 6 main themes that run across it. So journeys, nature, creativity, and then there are sub-themes under each of those items. So thematically, students will be dealing with, similar themes throughout the program, but the actual passages will be different. So, or could be different. So if you and I are in the same class and you're reading, 2 years more advanced than I am, I'll be placed in a certain passage at a certain level of challenge. You'll be placed in an entirely different passage at a more appropriate level of challenge for you. We would not both be getting the exact same passage but written at different reading levels. Is that what you were asking?
Yes, thank you.
Yes. Okay. Any other questions about comprehension? All right. So maybe we'll go over to vocab. So, one of the things we did when we were building the program is, there's a lot of stuff in vocabulary, whether morphology and idioms and multiple meaning words and homophones. But certainly, building out a rich vocabulary words is a critical part of vocabulary. And so we said, well, what words are we going to include in our program? So we went out and we did a survey of, most other publishers. And we said, well, how does everyone else make that decision? And it turns out that most publishers fit into one of 2 categories. The first category is a smaller category. We call it the convenience of the publisher. And in some of those cases, what they did is it seemed like they already had passages that were written, intellectual property that they wanted to repurpose or reuse. And so, you'd have a passage maybe on ancient Egypt or something, and then the vocabulary word would be something like sarcophagus. And, you'd look at that and be like, well, I understand that would be helpful for a student to understand the passage, but if you're really trying to build these kids' vocabulary, the next most important vocabulary word to add to a student's vocabulary in, Detroit City is probably not sarcophagus. So, we didn't want to do it that way. The majority of the publishers, however, used, vocabulary word list books. We're like, well, that seems reasonable. So, vocabulary word list books are these big books that basically level all sorts of vocabulary words based on grade level. So we said, well, okay, that kind of makes sense, but where did these vocabulary word list books come from? So we started researching that, and it turns out the vocabulary word list books were developed in the 50s by two researchers who were trying to do exactly that, which was kind of determine what grade levels vocabulary words were. So at the time, there were about 15 basal publishers in existence. And so they went and they cataloged what all the basal publishers were doing in the 1950s. And, one set of, let's say there were 15 publishers. Once, let's say 9 of them had introduced a word at a certain grade level, then that's the grade level the word became. So here we are 60, 70 years later, where, publishers are now using those word list books to kind of support the decision on where to put vocabulary words, when in fact those words were in those grades simply because of the decisions the publishers had made 60 years earlier. So we decided that really wasn't the way we were going to go. So the way we selected our vocabulary words is we went out and we found a corpus of authentic English language text, the kind of text a student would actually find in the real world, and it is 50 million English language words. And we then ranked all of the words in that corpus, that database of English language words, by both frequency and utility. And by utility, imagine, there's all of these texts came from, newspapers, journals, mythology, poems, science, every, letters, correspondence. It was really an eclectic collection of text. And the words that, were, we organized the words based on their source material. Were they from fiction or nonfiction? Was it related to science or math or history, social studies? And so the words that would occur across more domains got a higher utility score. So we then ranked words by frequency and pervasiveness or utility. And what you wind up with, you could have two words that are equally common, but they're not equally beneficial. So for example, a frequent word might be like dragon, which you might run into quite a bit, but you tend to only use it in a limited number of contexts. So you wouldn't really find it in nonfiction text. You wouldn't find it in history or math or science or, So it's maybe a common word, but it may not particularly beneficial. It may not be the next most important word for the student. So we did that kind of an exercise, and we ranked the words by, kind of usefulness and frequency. And that's kind of, we spent about 1.5 years doing that research project. And that's how we selected vocabulary words for the program. And you wind up with a lot of academic vocabulary words, so, words that can, you
click on a button
wind up
to get
using
started.
in a lot of different contexts. So I mentioned earlier about assessment. We partnered with Metametrics to build assessments, but one of the challenges, again, when we're want to build an efficient, impactful, accelerating program, is it's really important to know what the students know, but there's a price that comes with assessment. One of the problems is, a well-designed assessment will very quickly bring a student to failure. And these students have already known a lot of failure. And so one, it's sort of demoralizing to be presented once again with all the things you don't know. The second problem is the time you spent assessing is time you're not spending instructing and teaching. So, we spent quite a lot of time thinking about that conundrum. And so in the case of vocabulary, the first thing we do is we sort of invite the student, you tell us, which of these vocabulary words do you think you already know? And we'll give you a flash assessment on those. If you already tell us you don't know these words, let's not spend time testing you on them, right? And this also is very helpful to get these students asking themselves the question, what do I already know? Anyway, so there's, you can see there's quite a bit of vocabulary. let's skip down here. We work on inferring meaning from unknown words. Here we'll skip way down here just to show you some vocabulary activities.
Click.
So, here's, close activities as you would imagine, right? Synonyms, antonyms. We actually have riddles about the word. So we're really trying to build a deep exposure and comfort with the word. So we're not just teaching the definitions of the word, but we're talking about synonyms, antonyms, uses in context, riddles about the words, pictures of the words, to really try to get the student comfortable kind of actually incorporating those words into their own vocabulary.
Is it time for questions?
Sure.
Okay. The demo panel that
Click on a button to get started.
I'm sorry.
That you said that the students don't see that. Is that what the teachers see on their end?
Well, so I'm logged in as a student. So if the teachers want to see the program, we also have a profile called Trial Student, and that's what the teacher can do. So if she wants to, so for example, let's take remember the phonics instruction with one middle consonant. If she wants to log in, maybe kind of pre-teach some of this or go through this with a small group of students or with an individual student, she can go in as a trial student and she can do this sort of thing and jump around. She can actually, this is a shortcut jump around tool. You can actually jump to any place in the program at all through the teacher login, through the teacher credential. But the student wouldn't see this, but if the teacher logs in as a trial student, then the teacher would see this. And she can work with the students if she wants with this as well.
Okay, so like you said, some pre-teaching. Okay.
I just noticed the time. Maybe we should jump over to Fluency in the last 2 minutes we have. Is that okay? Or do you want to see more vocabulary?
Yeah, we are running up against the time.
Yeah. I'm happy to show you more Fluency, or maybe we should just pause for any other questions that we have right now.
I have a question. Do the kids get, do the teachers just assume where the kids should start just based on what we know about the students?
So there's two ways you could do it. One is the student would just sit down and would be presented with an initial assessment that was co-developed with Metametrics. And based on how they do on that initial assessment, the program will place the student in the appropriate starting level. Alternatively, the teacher could just make, what she knows about the student, or if she already has, a Lexile or other measure of the student reading, she could just go in and manually place the student at the appropriate level, according to her information. So you could do it either way.
Okay.
On average, how long does the assessment take the kids?
Well, there will be at most 40 questions. If the student is struggling and having a challenge getting answers correct, the assessment will truncate itself. So it could be significantly less than 40, but it would be at most 40. And it's designed to be done, within one class session. So, typically we've seen sort of 20 to 30 minutes.
Okay.
Is there any way you can show us like the teacher dashboard, like so how we see how the kids are doing?
Sure. So let me log out as a student.
I'll be seeing ya.
And here I'll log in as, so I'm logged in as sort of I think a teacher tech admin here. So let's go to reports. So here would be the reports I'd see. So let's say I want to be, here, I'll give you an example. I'm going to take a look at the district report. So since I'm, this user is only in one district, right, I would only see my district. And I would pick my dates. So let's go here to today. And by the way, if I wanted to filter my reports, I can, assuming I've been putting this data in about my students, I can filter my reports. So let's say I want to do, let's see, native language. So if I do native language, then I could sort of further filter for which language I'm looking for. But let's not do that. But you can really, depending on how big your deployment is, and if you want to look for Title I kids or ELL kids. But so let's just go generate report. So here I'm at the district level. So in this example, I can see the date ranges I searched for. I can see all my schools in the district that are using the program. And I can sort of just eyeball it real quickly. There's a short graph that kind of eyeballs some of the data for, but I say, well, okay, here's the number of kids, how many units they've completed, total time, average time. I can sort of scan this to see if there are any outliers. Here I see these two schools they don't even have any students here. But so I say, okay, I want to look at Anchor Bay. I can just click on Anchor Bay. And again, these are demo accounts. But here I would see, here's all the teachers using it in Anchor Bay. And I can again look to see if there's any outliers here. And I can further click on this teacher. And if she had multiple classes, I'd see all her classes here. But there's just this one class. So I can click on that class. And I can see all her students. Right? I can see what units each of her students are in, and in this time period, kind of where they started. If they were placed by the program, these blocks are light gray, as you see. If they were manually placed by the teacher, the blocks would be black, would be dark for the ones that they were manually placed in. So here are my students. I can see, performance alerts. If a student is struggling, the program will generate a performance alert and send a note to the teacher saying, hey, Andy's struggling on this unit. Turn to the teacher's guide and look at this unit where there's some kind of teacher tips that you might want to look at to help unstick him. But here I can click on this. I can click on this student.
And
here
how long would a student be, stuck on one area before his teacher would get that alert?
Yeah. So the way the program is designed is, assuming that you have not turned things off, if everything's on, that's right, then the student would be working through, phonics, vocabulary, comprehension, and fluency. And they would go through that in, one entire unit of that. And so, even in phonics in one unit could have multiple phonics concepts that they have to master. So there's a lot of content in the program. But they would go all the way through and they would get a score, based on how well they did. If they mastered it, there's some level of support when they go through it the first time. If they've mastered it with that moderate support, then we'll say, like, great, you mastered that. Now we're going to give you 0 support. Let's have you demonstrate independent mastery. And if they do that, then they graduate to the next thing. If they do really badly, they'll actually get more supports, and I showed you an example of, one example of what that might look like with that phonics sorting activity. But if a student is not progressing after 3 of those iterations, the teacher will get a yellow alert for the student saying that this kid has done it 3 times and, hasn't made satisfactory progress on it. If they do it 5 times, like if you don't do anything and the student is still struggling, if they hit the 5th one, then they'll get a red alert. So teachers will get yellow alerts after 3 and red alerts after 5. Okay.
Yep.
All right, so here's this one student. So I've drilled all the way down to the student. Now I'm at these are the different activities of different units the student's in. I can sort of see the start date, end date, total of hours, whether they had alerts, and I can look in one of the units. So let's say I click into this unit. So now I'm at the really granular level for the student, and I can see that he's working on this unit. Common, unusual plurals and high frequency words. I can see, level of support that they had. 2 is the mastery level, right? So here they've mastered it initially at the first level. They went right to the second level. First iteration only got 71. They did not master it. The next iteration, same mastery level, they did, and they mastered it and moved on, right? So you can actually see what they're working on, how they did, how many iterations they had, how they scored, etc. And you can see that unit by unit, kid by kid, drilling down all the way from the district level. Is that the kind of what you were looking for?
Yeah. I'm just wondering, like when we place them in a level, is all of that stuff, like the stories up there, they'll go through all the fluency and comprehension that's already done? They just click on one of those topics to work on?
Yes, that will all automatically happen, again, unless you customize it.
Okay.
So there is also another thing we didn't talk about is in fluency. I mentioned at the beginning where the student will practice fluency and can record themselves, right? After completing a certain number of units, there's going to be a formal fluency assessment where the student will then be presented with an unseen passage, one that they have not seen before, they have not practiced it before, and then either with the teacher or independently, ideally the way it would work is the teacher would say, the teacher will get a notice saying, Andy's ready for his formal fluency assessment. I would, sit down in front of the computer. I'd ask the student to start reading. I would click on the first word he read, and then I would observe his reading as he's reading aloud. I would click on the words he got wrong while he was reading, and then when he finished, I'd click on the last word the student read. Then the program will automatically tabulate words correct per minute because we know how many words they read, how long they were reading, how many words they got incorrect. And then there'll be a rubric that the teacher will then grade the student on the prosodic aspects of their reading. And all of that formal fluency assessment data would also be in the data reports.
And you said that just randomly comes up for the student?
No, it wouldn't be random. It's the completion of every third unit.
Oh, okay.
Of course, the teacher can manually assign that at any time she wants also. But again, if you just leave the program to itself, that formal fluency assessment will be every 3 units.
Okay.
And then they will have an automated level assessment. They'll get another metametrics assessment of only 20 questions every 6 weeks.
Okay.
But again, all of that can be manually scheduled if you prefer.
Back on the student one where you had like your fluency, your comprehension, your vocab, like all 4 of those choices were up.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Are those always going to be up where the kids just choose what they want, or do you have to, or will it just have one? I mean, because I'm just wondering if a kid always wants to do the vocab stuff and never does the comprehension, or do we just need to tell them today you're doing comprehension?
No, they will see the 4, but only one of them is active at a time.
Okay.
So they're required. They can only click on the next thing they're supposed to do.
Okay, awesome.
Okay, so thank you all very much for your time. I'd be delighted to answer any more questions if any come up.